He can make the introductions and kick us off.
Okay, thank you. Once again, this is an opportunity for everybody to learn something about property assessments. It's something that everybody that has a home in Gateway or Pitcairn has some interest in. This all gets started with Valerie asking a question a couple, month or two ago about an assessment that had taken place and where we were with it. And we came back to you with a report on that particular assessment. And it spawned some thoughts on my part to say, maybe other board members as well as residents would have some sort of questions or some interest in learning how this process works. So what I've done is invited two of the members of my firm, Bob Zunick and Matt Vento here tonight to speak on this subject. Both Chelsea and Dane also work in this area from time to time. I'm going to turn the matter over to Bob Zunick, and he's going to talk about, and I want to set the stage. So you know, there are two types of owner appeals. One is an owner appeal of a commercial property, and the other is an owner appeal of a residential property. Likewise, there are two types of appeals that the district can file. One on a commercial property, and the other as a residential property. Those four combinations are what we deal with on a day-to-day basis before the Board of Assessment downtown. With that, I'm gonna turn it to Bob, and he's our lead guy in this area, and he's gonna try to set out in simple terms what goes on with these types of assessments.
Thank you, Bruce. First of all, I'm a 1965 graduate of Gateway High School. My first home was on King Lear Drive when I got married in 1969. So I know this area pretty good. Anyway, this is about the assessment process, the ins and outs of the appeal process. And as Bruce indicated, starting, there are two types of, there are two typical parties in an assessment appeal. The assessment law is covered under the second-class county assessment law and a general assessment law that applies statewide. Every year, beginning in January 1st, any taxing body or any owner, be it commercial or residential, has the right to appeal their assessment by filing an assessment appeal from January 1st to March 31st. We file appeals on behalf of the school district, number one, to counterbalance the appeals that are filed by owners and are likely to be successful. But more importantly, we file them because there are fluctuations in values created by market conditions that make appeals important to the school district. Generally speaking, countywide assessments, when the whole county is assessed, take place once every 10 or 20 years. There are counties in Pennsylvania that haven't reassessed their properties for 25 years, but Allegheny County has always been pretty active in that area. But we view assessment appeals as a way to periodically, that is annually, adjust the values in the community in which you conduct your business here in Gateway School District. So why do school districts kind of run the show? It's because you have the biggest piece of the pie. Of the approximate 30 mills that are taxable in Gateway School District, you have about 2/3 of that pie.
The others being the county and the local.
The process is supposed to be fair and uniform, and we try to carry out that process um, with that uniformity issue in mind. The procedure starts with somebody filing an appeal, be it school district or owner. That appeal goes to the local Board of Property Assessments and Review. There are sometimes as many countywide as 10,000 hearings, appeals a year. After the reassessment in 2012, there were greater than 20,000 appeals spread out throughout the county. The assessment appeal hearings at the lowest level are very informal. They're heard by hearing officers who are generally licensed real estate people, brokers, and salespeople. And as I said, they're conducted very informal, and generally people are allowed to put their case forward in the manner that they feel appropriate. There is an appeal process. Anybody that's disappointed with their decision at the Board of Property Assessment and Review can appeal to the Board of Viewers, which is the first level of appeal. That is a little more formal. Generally, people are represented on both sides by counsel, and distinguishing it from the lower level. In the lower level, we are not allowed to negotiate settlements. We are not allowed to make deals. The Property Board of Assessment believes that some people are treated unfairly if they're not aware of the possibility of coming to an agreement. So there are no agreements at the lowest level. You present your case, we present our case, and the board decides what the assessment should be. In your situation, talking about residential appeals, how do we come to the conclusion that an appeal should be filed? Well, we're very practical about it, number one. And number two, we're only going to take it under circumstances that make assessment dollars for you. Matt is our paralegal in the office. This year, Gateway School District appealed about 150 residential assessments. Our appeal success rate is about 95%. That is because we know how to prove our cases, and we only take the cases that we can win. In terms of preparing our cases, we have a computer program, number one, that tracks residential and commercial sales in the Gateway School District. We have a formula that we employ that makes sense and treats everybody uniformly. The formula that we employ is that we take no appeal unless the property value is at a minimum of $100,000. We also take no appeal unless there's at least a 30% difference between the sale price of the home that just sold recently and the current assessed value. Now we also factor in what's known as the common level ratio. The common level ratio is simply a factor that is devised by the state that takes into consideration the difference between what properties sell for and what they're assessed at. In 2020, the common level ratio in Allegheny County is 0.86. So what they're telling us is that, generally speaking, your assessment is at least 14% below your property market value. So we factor that in also into the formula by which we take an appeal. So when it's all said and done in a residential situation, what we do is, using the common level ratio and the formula that I just described, there's typically about a $40,000 difference between all those factors, sale price and assessed value. And we're looking to get at least $30,000 for the school district. That's kind of like the cutoff where maybe it wouldn't be practical to do it. But that's what triggers an appeal.
As I say $30,000, you're talking about increasing the assessment by 30,000.
We're talking about at least getting a return of $30,000 in assessment dollars for every appeal we take.
Which turns into what in money, do you know?
Well, it's for every $100,000, you produce $3,000 in tax dollars. So for 30,000, it'd be roughly 30% of that, which is
Just under 1,000.
so to give you an example in the clearest sense, if that formula works, you would probably get $1,000 in tax assessment across the board. And of that, the school district would get 2/3 of it.
It's like $600. It's
Yeah.
$600.
$600
Yeah,
Okay.
$600 in tax revenue for the school for every
And
30,000.
what is beautiful about that is you only pay for the appeal once. So we take our appeal, presumably we win, and then that tax assessment increase carries over year to year, so that you get the benefit of that win until the assessment changes, either because it sells and goes higher or something bad happens, which rarely happens.
So it compounds itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it keeps going every year.
Okay, I actually have an actual case that I brought to you to show an example of how this works and how we prepare our cases. This is a real case from this year. So in this particular case, what would have happened is Mr. Vento would have been surveying sales information on our computer. And we determined, if you look down in this cover sheet, you'll see that there's a sale price of $324,900. And below that, you see that the current county assessed value before we took the appeal was $177,200. Well, that clearly met our criteria, and we took an appeal on this particular property. So to prove our appeal, what we do is the primary information that is admissible to establish fair market value is comparable sales. Not only does our computer allow us to track sales information, it allows us to spit out comparables because it's all uploaded into the system. The county is actually divided, and Gateway School District is divided into neighborhoods. And we actually search for comparables in the same neighborhood code that the county has assigned those particular properties. So, for example, in Garden City is all one neighborhood code. As you can imagine, there may be 1,000 homes in Garden City, and many of them are identical. So if you have a one-story ranch in Garden City, chances are we can spit out the exact same house that's sold in the same neighborhood in the same year, and we can compare prices. Those are extremely good comparables. But in this particular case, this property happens to be in Edgemead, and when we filed the appeal, this is the evidence that we took before the board. The sale price was $324,900. The assessment was $177,200. One of the other good pieces of evidence that we can present, we also search for mortgages, because in today's market, many people are borrowing up to the maximum they can borrow, and that often approximates the sale price or supports the sale price. In this particular case, this person borrowed $276,165 to finance the purchase of this home. So we brought all that information to the board, and the way we present it is, you don't have to page through every part of our evidence, but we start with the hearing notice that shows it's our appeal. We present the county data that is referred to on page 2 that historically documents what we're saying, and that is that the property sold on such and such a date for such and such a price, and it's assessed way below at whatever it is. Here it's 177.2. We present the deed for the property that confirms the consideration paid, so nobody can say I didn't really pay that much. On page 4, we present the mortgage information that we print out from the court records or the deed records of the property. And once again, I tell you that this is a very persuasive piece of information. And then we start searching for comparables, and Matt does all this on the computer. We print a picture of the house, again, that comes from the county website. The county also compares properties for purposes of assessment by building characteristics. So when we're searching for a comparable, not only are we searching for a 2-story home, we're searching for a 2-story home that has approximately 2,000 square feet of living space.
Yeah, if you go about halfway through, you'll see a page that it lines up all of the property that was that one. It lines up the subject property with the comparables that we found. And like when we're looking for the comparables, we try to find them as close to the subject in as many categories as we can. Like if you look on this page, you'll see
It's marked page 7.
page 7. Yeah, sorry. You'll see it has the subject property, and then 2 of the comparables are actually on the same street in the same plan. So then you look down and you can see they both got the same number of bedrooms, bathrooms, built around the same time. It was all built by the same developer at the same time. So they're good as far as the building characteristics. They're almost identical. The third one is in a different plan, but still the same neighborhood, they call it. So that one wasn't as good of a comparable as the other 2, but it was good enough for us to get the win in this case.
These are excellent comparables because they're all about the same square footage. They're similar in style. They all were sold within a year of the purchase price of this one. And they all look like nice 2-story homes in Monroeville. We print a map locating the properties in relation to the subject property. Then finally, this is what gives us our suggested market value. This is what this program does is it takes all the comparables, it takes the subject, it makes corrections in values based on square footage. You'll see the square footage is on the right-hand side. The average square footage for these properties is $140.61 per square foot. So it suggests a value of $283,479. Now, we didn't use that particular value here because we had the purchase price. I'm sorry, we did use that value. So our suggested value was $283,500, which is less than the sale price adjusted by the comparables, and came out.
When you reduce the sale price by the common level ratio, it comes out to about that 280,000.
Yeah,
that's all the higher we could ask for.
If you look at the last page in our example, this is the disposition that we got. We asked for 283.5. We got 279,300. And the reason for that is they took the common level ratio, took our comparables into consideration, and multiplied the common level ratio 0.86 times 324.9, and we were right on the money. So, I mean, the cases aren't always this clean, but this is an example of one of the cases that we took and we were successful in. So I think that pretty much covers residential appeals. I would say a couple of things. Number one, owners also take appeals, and unfortunately for the owners, they mostly represent themselves, and you know what happens when that happens. They lose. So we rarely go to owner appeals because they don't know how to prove their case. Almost all the owners that go to appeals by themselves don't realize that they have to prove comparable sales, and they bring comparable assessments in. In other words, they go up and down the street and they see what their neighbor's assessment is. And they said, well, my assessment should be the same. Why isn't it? Well, it's because you just paid $100,000 more for your house. So that's one of the ways that we adjust for market during the course of these periods when there isn't any countywide assessment. A couple of things I thought were worth mentioning to you. When we started doing these assessment appeals probably 10 years ago, the average price of a home in Garden City was about $100,000. This year, most of the cases that we're appealing, those $100,000 houses are now $150,000 or $160,000. And that's what triggers the appeal because it fits into our formula. And at the same time, we're kicking your assessment base up on an annual basis instead of waiting for everything to catch up. A lot of times you'll hear owners complain, well, I just bought this house, you singled me out. Well, we didn't single anybody out. We treated everybody exactly the same. When Matt surveys his sales information, he gives us a complete list of what those sales are. I don't care what your name is. I don't care what the circumstances are. If you fit our criteria, we file an appeal. And that's the, I want to tell you also that there are some pretty high priced areas in Monroeville. In Shalimar, which everybody knows, the houses range from 500,000 to 800,000. Over on Arden Drive, they're very expensive. So when they sell a house over there, the increase generally is expensive too, and we reap the benefit of that. But we do this on an annual basis, and we believe it produces good results for the school district. I want to move now to commercial appeals. And just by way of example, as I said to you at the start, we filed about 150 residential appeals. Matt tells me that we only filed 8 commercial appeals this year. There haven't been a lot of positive turnovers in commercial properties for any of the communities in the eastern suburbs, but Gateway for sure. And I think you're all aware why. But we do the same thing for commercial appeals as we do for residential appeals. We have a formula, but the stakes are higher because the values are higher and it's more expensive to appeal a commercial case or to fight an appeal. In all these residential cases that we've done, and as I said, we do hundreds a year, we never used an appraiser. All this product is our own work product from the internal process that we have at our office. When we do commercial appeals, because the stakes are higher, we always consider using an appraisal, but we try to get by without using an appraisal. So in these cases, most people, owners are represented by lawyers, school districts are represented by lawyers. And for a commercial appeal, for us to take an appeal, there has to be at least $100,000 in difference between assessment and sale price. We also factor in, just like we did the common level ratio, because the common level ratio is an automatic adjustment that lowers the potential for our increase. So when it's said and done, if we can't get a 40% increase in commercial cases, we will not file the appeal. It's not practical. The difference between commercial appeals and residential appeals, as I said, is we use an appraiser. We have our own appraiser. We contact him both for consultation and for appraisals, and we usually try out to get an opinion of value from him before we ask for an appraisal. The difference being his opinion of reviewing the evidence that we give him might cost a couple $100. An appraisal might cost a couple $1,000. In terms of market trends, just some things that I've observed this year. The land values along Route 22 are really, really strong, and there probably isn't a lot on Route 22 unless it's unbuildable that isn't worth $1 million. And that factors into our process. The small commercial buildings in the Gateway School District along 22 all over Monroeville are much more stable this year than the ones I'm going to talk about. Everybody, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I have a lot of, I would say, memory, good and bad, about the process. But I will tell you, starting off, that the biggest disappointments in doing these appeals is the devaluation in Monroeville Mall. When I started to do Gateway appeals over 10 years ago, the Monroeville Mall was the highest priced assessed value in Monroeville, and it was valued at $149 million. This year, because of market conditions and multiple appeals, the value of the mall is $70 million. The Westinghouse Nuclear Center was a very big hit to take. When we started doing appeals, Nuke Center was $45 million, and it was the second highest priced commercial property in Monroeville. Today, as we sit here, you all know that the Nuke Center is gone. It's in Cranberry, and right now it's occupied by a condominium that's trying to sell office space, and it's currently assessed at $17 million. We looked at it as a possible appeal this year, and I actually did a site visit, and it was only partially occupied, and I didn't ultimately appeal that one. We're getting a lot of appeals from big box stores and hotels. As you can imagine, the hotel business in Monroeville is really taking a hit this year. Macy's is a freestanding store at the mall. It's not part of a parcel that encompasses the mall. The main part of the mall is one tax parcel. Dick's and Penny's on the other end, the former Kaufman's, is another tax parcel. It's a separate tax parcel. Same way with Macy's, it's its own tax parcel, and it has taken an appeal. Its value was once at $10 million. It's down to around $5 million after the appeals. We're starting to get appeals related to the impact of COVID. The appraisers that I've talked to indicate that if you get an appraisal that's adjusted for the financial issues caused by COVID, the value of the property will be between 35 and 40% less than what its market value was. Let's say the difference is as easy as this. On January 1st, the property might be worth $5 million. On March 31st, after COVID took hold, you can reduce the market value of that property by 35 to 40%. And you can get an appraiser to come in and testify that it's 35% less. So we're facing that probably coming next year. I did want to talk a little bit about one of the better appeals that we've had, not necessarily to toot our own horn, but to show you how changing circumstances oftentimes work to the advantage of the school district.
Lord reading on the paper now. Many, many trees.
I read all this when I can't sleep.
I'll be quick about this because I know time's flying. Our biggest recent victory for the school district has been the increase in assessment at the Miracle Mile Shopping Center. This is just a brief synopsis taken from my file, but to summarize, I actually learned about the mall or the Miracle Mile selling by reading this newspaper article in the Post-Gazette in the winter of 2018. And I didn't quite understand everything because the transaction wasn't a straight sale under kind of traditional real estate terms. It was an asset purchase where the developer came in and purchased more than a majority of the value of the mall, the Miracle Mile, but there wasn't a deed recorded, and there was an issue of whether or not this was a taxable event. But we ultimately found out positively that it was a taxable event, and we went forward. But in terms of doing this, as I said, I consulted our appraiser, Anthony Barna, regarding the appeal. I explained the issue to him, and he came back to me and indicated that he thought it would be a worthwhile appeal, and we went forward. When we started to do our research before the appeal was taken, we learned that the purchaser, in this case, as I'll call him, actually paid a realty transfer tax on this property, and that the realty transfer tax indicated to me that if the property purchaser was required under law to pay a realty transfer tax, it was also likely subject to an increased assessment. So we went forward and we filed our appeal. When the Miracle Mile assessment in 2018, before we filed our appeal, was $40 million for the main parcel that comprises everything but the Pittsburgh National Bank property. The PNC property is a separate parcel. So the total assessed value for those two parcels was approximately $44 million. As I indicated, or as the newspaper indicates, not me, it looked like they paid as much as $78 million for this property. So we realized that it was substantially more than $44 million. When it all came down to conciliating or attempting to settle the property, it was clear that I needed an appraisal. So I hired our appraiser to do an appraisal, and the appraisal, just in summary form, is there in your packet. But basically what it said was that the total value of the Miracle Mile as it sits was $73.9 million. So we went from approximately 44 million to approximately 73.9 million. And ultimately we settled this particular assessment for a little over $70 million. The reason that that's really germane is that $70 million assessment makes up for the decrease in assessment at the Monroeville Mall. And without this, you would have taken a tremendous hit. And 10 years ago, who would have thought that the Miracle Mile would be worth as much as the Monroeville Mall? But that's what happened in this particular case. Now, just in concluding that, this appeal generates $400,000 a year in additional tax monies for Gateway. And it'll continue to accrue $400,000 a year as long as it remains on appeal and the assessment stays the same. So this was a tremendous benefit that might not have happened were you not doing what you're doing. And as I said, in summary, the best way to keep up with the market is to continue doing these appeals. Every school district in Allegheny County of any substance does the same thing. And you can go down to the third floor of the county office building and you'll see 20, 30 solicitors there at a time. And we're all doing the same thing. So I would urge you to consider keeping this going because it's really a no-lose proposition for Gateway.
Now, if the mall can reinvent itself,
What's that?
the mall can reinvent itself and raise the assessed value once again.
Well, I don't know what reinvention will take place, but we can keep our fingers crossed.
Does anybody know if the double tree sale?
The what?
Double tree was up for sheriff's sale, I thought.
I don't, they're
Bankruptcy, I thought.
if you can't pay your bills, you're not worried about paying your taxes.
Right.
And chances are, I don't know whether they're delinquent or not, but we have not had an assessment appeal from the DoubleTree in 2020. We had one several years ago.
Yeah, it was like 17 or 18, I think. we
Yeah,
had an appeal.
but I will tell you this, the Holiday Inn, which is now Best Western, that tax assessment 5 years ago was $7.5 million. It's going to be down to about 3 because of the market conditions. So it's choppy waters out there, but we're trying to navigate it as best we can. So thank you. That's all I have.
Anybody have any questions? I mean, you get
Yeah, I
a
have
flavor
one.
for it.
I will say, anytime you have a question, please feel free to call me and I'll do my best. The other thing I might tell you is I do get calls from taxpayers and I don't slough them off. I try to tell them about the process and I try to encourage them to do what they feel they should do without avoiding my allegiance to Gateway. So I don't hang up on taxpayers, or I try to answer their questions.
Okay, question. I'm just looking at the mall, at the American Mile right now. The sale price is 52 million, but it's only assessed at 40.
I can't hear it.
Take your mouth, we can't hear you.
There you go.
The
So,
Miracle Mile one.
okay, the
Okay, go
American
ahead.
Mile
Yeah,
is showing that its sale price is 52 million. But the assessed value in 18 was 40 million. So you're looking at a $12 million difference. So
I'm not seeing that.
She's asking, I think, why the retail price and the assessment value aren't the same. I think that's what she's getting at.
I think that the
Why
sale
our assessment
price
value is lower than sale price.
is a while ago. I think if you,
say that again.
What are we looking at?
what year was the sale?
2005.
Okay, so that sale price wouldn't impact the assessed value anymore because they usually only go by the sale price for a couple of years. The sale price we're going off of is the one from the corporate transfer that they said wasn't a sale.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, the assessment, the sale price that shows here was a 2005 sale price. Fortunately, we didn't represent Gateway in 2005, but this 52,000 was not appealed. So it remained the same until we took our appeal in 2018. So instead of getting a bump maybe because it was $52,000, it remained near $40,000. That's because no appeal was taken.
40 million.
If an appeal was taken, then you'd have got the benefit of some increase then.
When there was also the reassessment in 2012, that would have changed it. It was 2012 or 13 is when they reassessed all the properties in Allegheny County. So they would have kind of, whatever the assessment was based on that 2005.
This would have been a
sale.
2012 reassessment.
Yeah, they would have changed it to that 42,000 or whatever it was before we took the appeal.
Okay, so my question again, as I asked Mr. Dice, if someone is going to pay $245,000 for a house that they're going to appeal for 30, 40,000 less, why are they paying that price then and not getting assessed on it? Do you know, this is what.
No, there's the common level ratio, number one. automatically is applied to any fair market value we establish. So in a situation where we prove that, I'll give you a very simple example. The house sold for $100,000. The comparables reflect that there's $100,000 in value in the property and support a fair market value. Without us, it automatically happens. That house will be reduced by 14% to $86,000 because of that common level ratio that's statewide. Our percentage is different than Philadelphia or Westmoreland. Everybody has a different percentage, but based on sales information, they set a ceiling on how high it can go. That's the common level ratio.
Thank you.
A lesson on assessments and tax appeals. It's very informative.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. For your time.
How often do they do the assessments? Like that they will do county assessments?
Again, I can't.
What's
How
the-
often do they reassess the county properties?
Our last one was 2012,
Okay.
and they have no plans to reassess now.
I think Westmoreland,
It goes back to 1985,
I know Westmoreland was 74.
yeah,
I mean, that's-
1974.
because we had a judge in Allegheny County, his name was Weddick, who was obsessed with assessments. And he was very proactive in forcing the county to follow the law that generally nobody else in Pennsylvania cares about, because they just adjust up or down depending on what they need.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, any questions, just give us a call. All right, thanks, guys.
Ladies first.
Okay, we're taking a quick break, and in a couple minutes, we will call to